Compared to when COVID-19 broke out in Wuhan early 2020, the situation in Shanghai is noticeably different, with high numbers of COVID cases, the great majority of which are relatively benign and more asymptomatic carriers. How is the city and the country dealing with the situation? Has the time come for China to focus on easing its strict COVID restrictions? How is China's dynamic zero COVID policy evolving? To put these issues into perspective, I'm pleased to be joined from Shanghai by Professor Chen at East China Normal University, and from Washington, D.C. by Eric Ding, our old friend, Senior Fellow at the Federation of American Scientists. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Eric, I know you you were born in Shanghai, right? Am I right? Can I say that? Okay, so you have obviously a lot to say. And Professor Chen, are you under lockdown at this moment?
Yes, obviously I am.
Okay, so it's very personal. But let's get the big picture first. Some latest statistics. We can tell that the city experienced high numbers of asymptomatic cases in the past 2 weeks. That's the green line. The total figure exceeded 10,000 on Monday. But the symptomatic COVID cases, which noticeably increased in March, remain under 500, which is the red line. Still, when I say surges in Chinese term, they're actually extremely low compared to other countries. But these are the official reported numbers, okay? So I'm not saying they could be 100% correct, but this is from the Chinese official government. Let me go to Professor Chen first. How is the severity of the situation from someone who's been locked down on the ground?
Yeah, we've been, under the lockdown for officially for about a week, but before that, obviously, we have been locked off in our compounds, living compounds, and we've been working from home, for almost like 3 weeks, So the
Are people going
situation now
crazy?
is actually. Yes, emotionally, obviously, people could be, quite, undergoing anxiety. But generally speaking, people are understanding about the severity of the situation, and people understand that actually we have to cope with this situation.
Eric, how do you look at the really harsh measures, or the suppression, let's say, really against this virus? And we're not just seeing people in Shanghai working against the virus, be it asymptomatic or benign cases. Medical teams from around the country are assisting Shanghai as if it were Wuhan 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think the sign of 10,000 doctors and nurses being sent to Shanghai from around the country shows that the Chinese government is taking it seriously. But that sends a message to me that they are very serious, that they're continuing the lockdowns, and they're now doing announced another round of tests for all Shanghai citizens, because they're realizing containing Omicron, especially BA2, is extremely difficult. And we just need to look anywhere other places in the world to see that if you let it go unchecked, it will cause huge hospitalizations and huge number of deaths. And in England right now, just even 3 months after their first Omicron BA1 wave, their second wave has already exceeded the hospitalization of the first wave's peak. And that was just 3 months ago.
But they opened up. But they opened up completely. They opened up completely. Eric, this is what I can't understand. Why do they still choose to open up if they have such high hospitalization? And why?
Yeah,
why?
It's very ludicrous. It's morally bankrupt to do that. There's in between full reopening and lockdowns. There's so much you can do. There's mitigations you can do, but the UK and many European countries have just completely given up. I think it's also just bad political leadership on that side. But obviously lockdowns you can't do it forever. It's costing the Chinese economy a lot.
Right.
But at the same time, right now, containing it, especially since vaccination rates in the elderly among those over the age of 85 is much lower than it should be. This is the best way to protect citizens, and while we're working on next generation of vaccines. But I think China also needs to work on better masks. Like, everyone's wearing surgical masks. They're not good enough. You need to wear the N95, KN95 types. And you do need ventilation, air disinfection, which is not common or standard yet.
Okay.
So we need to do many other things to make life sustainable.
I have to say that on a daily basis, 4 million COVID tests are carried out in Shanghai at this moment. So they want to find out exactly who are infected, who are not. And the number of old people vaccinated in China, I mean 80%, my understand was over 60%, so they still need time. But Professor Chen, this issue really caught international attention, is the separation of infants, babies who are infected from their parents who may not be affected, but because of the danger or the risk of infection, they were separated from, these babies were separated from their family, and that has caused a lot of international attention. I understand that the authorities have taken steps. Now they're allowing, you know, if the parents do not care, they allow certain arrangements so that the parents can be with the children. But how hard is it for people's lives and emotions, you know, and family ties to be taken care of at the same time?
Well, first of all, I should say that actually the separation of babies and their parents was only one case in one hospital in Jinshan district. It is not a government policy. That is actually, universal policy, blank policy, to be imposed on all the institutions. So I think actually this is one scenario, and in which actually that has been causing, anxiety and really, outcry, public outcry within Shanghai, and people simply, are raising their voices, and the government recognizes this grievance and make due, adjustments. So I think actually this is a new situation. Shanghai is coping with such a kind of upsurge of new cases, huge numbers. So Shanghai is learning to cope with the situation. You can't simply play by the book all the
But
time.
what's
Sometimes you need to make adjustments and to be more flexible.
Sure, but the targeted approach is emphasized all the time, meaning the impact on socioeconomic life has to be minimized. But when you have such large-scale lockdowns, almost indiscriminate, if you have a few cases in a compound, the whole compound is kind of locked down. Is it really realistic to take care of the livelihood as well? Because businesses have a lot of complaints, especially small, medium-sized businesses, especially international businesses. So what about that side of the story?
I think that was exactly what Shanghai had been trying to explore, a kind of middle ground. Because on the one hand, we have got this kind of very, as you said, draconian, harsh, measures to be imposed on, a city, a province. On the other hand, we have got this kind of very laxative, very open, simply, we call in Chinese, we call a kind of lie back,
Lying
approach, in
down,
which actually
right.
all,
Let it rip.
lying down, yeah, yes, in other words, you're simply lifting all the measures, restrictive measures. But actually, all these two, approaches do have their, really, very, shortcomings. And so Shanghai was trying to find a middle ground in which actually, on one
Is
hand, they're clamping down on the emergence of, the viruses. On the other hand, they try to reinsure actually the smooth running of the economy and social life.
And I think
That was
that,
actually,
yeah, sorry, because time is really limited, and I want to hear from Eric.
mm,
Is there a middle ground?
mm,
Is there a middle ground? Because that is the biggest dispute, right? People are saying, let's look at Singapore. Singapore changed its zero policy to let it rip, and it seems that despite an initial spike of deaths, they have kind of, achieved certain level of success. Is there a middle ground? Is that a good example for China?
Yeah, there are definitely middle ground that you can keep society open while mitigating COVID. The issue is that's not easy either, and it takes a lot of effort. But I would argue it's much easier than a citywide lockdown. Like, we do not want, for example, UK, Denmark's or Swedish approach whatsoever. That's the let it burn mass infection, and that is not a good, morally responsible thing to do. At the same time, lockdowns are only temporary. So I think but you can't rely on vaccines only. You have to have vaccines plus premium masks for all citizens, which I'm sure China has resources to procure, plus the regular testing, contact tracing, of course, and plus again, ventilation and air disinfection. indoor air quality right now is just as important as outdoor air pollution. Indoor air pollution of this virus is what allows super spreading. And if you have all these mitigations, you can reopen without letting it spread unfettered like many other European countries.
Can China really risk trying a different approach, and then if it is not successful, let's come back to our dynamic zero? Eric?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think we can contain it with these other mitigations, because small spreading, again, is not the big issue. It's the mass super spreading. And the mass super spreading are the things that we can mitigate against. We can't prevent every small infection within each family, right? But we can prevent the massive workplace, factory, school outbreaks that truly endanger a whole neighborhood. And those things require mitigations. And those, again, besides vaccines and testing and, of course, boosters, and again, ventilation, air disinfection. Those are critical things that Chinese can invest.
Professor Chen, sorry, Professor Chen, 20 seconds, please. Why is it so important for China to keep it right and not to make missteps? That's the impression I get. Is that how you see it as well?
Yes, I think actually China has got such a kind of huge population, and also this is the second largest economy in the world. So try to ensure actually the both try to find out a way that actually the two goals won't clash. That is what China has been targeting at. We may have setbacks, but still, for example, like Shanghai, we're not at a standstill. Things are still going. So I think actually we're able to overcome the temporary difficulties and try to aim for actually a better outcome in the future.
And every country have their circumstances, so whether they're morally wrong or whatsoever, I don't think it's in our position to judge. But Eric Ding's perspective, of course, much appreciated as always, and Professor Chen Hong joining us from Shanghai. Thank you so much. And that's it for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, on behalf of the team, thank you for joining us, and you've got the point.